Hello everyone, Brian Kibler here with StarCityGames.com, and we are going to be playing some Teamer today. I've been exploring various builds of Teamer pretty much the entire standard season, and as the metagame during the season shifts, so does the appropriate build of any given deck. And the Teamer deck that I have been working on has undergone quite a few revisions, and this is the most recent version. The big differences between this deck and my more recent build is that I've totally gone away from Lightning Strike. At the beginning of the season, Jeskai aggro decks with Mantis Rider, Rabble Master, Seeker of the Way were all sort of the big thing. That was most popular deck in the format by a significant margin, in fact. And against those decks, Lightning Strike was one of the best cards available. You wanted to be able to kill Mantis Rider, preferably before it hit you, so you wanted something instant speed, dealt 3 damage. Great, Lightning Strike. But nowadays, the Jeskai decks tend to be token-oriented decks built around Jeskai Ascendancy and things like Raise the Alarm and Hordling Outburst. And you also just see more and more just Abzan decks that are not even playing cards like Fleecemane Lion. There's Abzan Reanimator decks that have basically nothing other than Hornet Queen and its tokens that actually die to Lightning Strike. So I actually found that there was kind of a negative correlation between my win percentage and the number of copies of Lightning Strike that I drew, because it was just such a weak card in so many of the matchups I was playing, so I decided to get rid of it entirely. The only removal in the deck now are 4 copies of Crater's Claws, as well as 2 copies of Sarkhan the Dragon Speaker, and just creatures that can fight your opponents like Pelucranos. And your dudes are generally bigger than other people's because you're playing a bunch of giant green creatures and red dragons, and they tend to win most fights. So this deck is really more of sort of a monster-style deck that is basically just splashing for Stubborn Denial, and then has Crater's Claws to kill small creatures or just kill your opponent. The difference between the previous version I played at the most recent event that I competed in, the Cardmageddon tournament in Las Vegas, is I actually also have gone away from the Xenaghost as I was trying out. Xenaghost is a card that originally is sort of like the opposite of Lightning Strike. It was oppressed by Mantis Rider because Xenaghost from the previous standard format was really, really powerful, but the fact that there was a 3/3 haste flyer meant that a 3 loyalty planeswalker that made 2/2 ground creatures wasn't really particularly well positioned. And I tried Xenaghost, and it was okay. But it never, because there's so many Courses of Kruphix and Siege Rhinos, which also has Trample and effectively attacks Xenaghost even through your tokens, I just found it wasn't really doing all that much. The tokens themselves weren't very effective, and I felt like often, I would rather just have cast a 4 casting cost creature on turn 4 and then cast a 5 casting cost creature on turn 5, rather than play Xenaghost, tick up, and then do 4 and 5 on turn 5. Because it also just meant that I had to spend resources trying to protect the Xenaghost from my opponent's stuff. So other than that, the sideboard is really, I think, the next really interesting place. I have gone to only 2 copies of Magma Spray, and then I have 4 copies of Arc Lightning. Now this removal package, much like the removal of the Lightning Strikes from the main deck, does weaken you a little bit against Blue-White Heroic. That was one of the matchups that you really wanted Lightning Strike. You really want more copies of Magma Spray, but I haven't seen Blue-White Heroic be super popular lately. It is performing pretty well at the standard portion of the Players' Championship this weekend in the hands of Tom Ross, though he actually did poorly in his groups and then had to fight his way through the elimination rounds. So Blue-White Heroic is really the place where you want stuff like Magma Spray. Arc Lightning can serve as a cheap removal spell against, say, Mono Red. Mono Red aggro decks tend to have a bunch of small creatures where Arc Lightning shines, and Arc Lightning is also very good against any of the token-based decks. Being able to kill a Rabble Master and its token, or all the things from Hordling Outburst, or both things from Raise the Alarm and ping something else, that's a valuable feature of a card. It's arguable that maybe you want some number of copies of Anger of the Gods. I think Anger is a possible option as well, instead of perhaps some number of Arc Lightnings. But you have your own Rattleclaw Mystics and Sylvan Caryatids die to Anger, so I'm not 100% sold that that's really the direction you want to go. Also, Ashcloud Phoenix dies to Anger. Oh, hiccup. Anyway, then I have 3 copies of Disdainful Stroke and 2 copies of Teamer Charm. So I found while I was playing against the Abzan Whip decks at Carmageddon. They were actually played by Shahar and Dave Williams and AJ Soccer were my opponents who I ran into playing Abzan Whip. So they're a pretty tough field for that tournament. And what I found was I actually was losing games to just resolved Siege Rhinos because I didn't really have very many ways to actually deal with it once it hit play. Generally speaking, I was sideboarding out at least most of my Crater's Claws in those matchups because they don't really have small creatures you're looking to kill. And yes, it's good at finishing them off, but they're a whip deck, so often you need to interact on the board and deal with what they have, and also a whip deck with Rhino, so Fireball you isn't necessarily your best way to win. And I was just losing games where they would just resolve a Temur Charm, or not resolve a Temur Charm, resolve a Siege Rhino, or multiple Siege Rhinos, and I just couldn't get them off the board. And Temur Charm's a card that not only can allow one of your large creatures to fight Siege Rhino with +1/+1, but also can help you stop Hornet Queen or Whip or whatever from hitting the table with the Mana Leak ability, and force your creatures past Hornet Queen and Courser and Caryatid with the Can't Block ability. So basically every part of the Buffalo gets used against Abzan Whip decks with Temur Charm. So I think it's a good choice there. It's also reasonably useful against other decks that have other sorts of large creatures, large spells. This can actually come in against heroic decks to allow you to fight their big creatures with your larger creatures. So you lose a little bit of the ability to react quite as effectively to your opponent's small things immediately, but Temur Charm gives you the ability to kill them later when they've gotten a little bit bigger. You can kill most things with Polukranos and Temur Charm. Lastly, we have Back to Nature in addition to a couple copies of Destructive Revelry. It's possible that this mix is incorrect, that it should be 2 Back to Nature, 1 Revelry, or even 3, but I like Destructive Revelry's ability to kill Perilous Vault against blue-black control, because that's one of their most important cards against you. And also, the damage dealt by Revelry is pretty relevant, and the Back to Nature... sometimes it'll get 2 things, but you're often just using it as a 1-for-1 anyway, and getting a little bit of extra damage in a deck that has just a bunch of creatures that you're trying to beat your opponent down with is pretty valuable. So, but against the Constellation decks, the Whip style decks, I really like having these as sort of a go-to. I don't know how many of them you want. Thing is, if Abzan Whip decks end up being the most popular version of the deck, then the fact that they have Siege Rhino as well means that they have powerful things that you need to be able to interact with in addition to the enchantment package. So against straight green-black Constellation, Back to Nature is incredible because it can just blow up all their stuff. But against the Abzan versions, you can't really be stuffing just tons of enchantment removal in your deck because otherwise you just lose to a Siege Rhino. So it's also very important to keep in mind when you're sideboarding that you don't want to just take all your aggressive stuff out of your deck, all your creatures out of your deck, because then you can end up in a situation where you're just drawing a bunch of reactive cards, and you need to be an aggressive deck. That's sort of how things are built. So anyway, we're gonna take this puppy for a spin and see how she does. So let's get to it.